both issues that I've mentioned, both dysmenorrhea, which is menstrual pain, and dyspareunia, painful intercourse, affect hundreds of millions of women and are both real unmet needs. There are no dedicated treatments that the, I would say, Western industry has provided them.
Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Just sit back, relax, and learn from the leaders of today. It's a journey. Each one is different, unique, inspiring. Let's get started. This episode is powered by J Ventures, a community-driven VC fund in Silicon Valley in partnership with Lumir, sponsored by Homeward Ventures, Hippo Insurance, Upwest Labs, Synergy Global, Hillel at Stanford, Leap, Birthright Excel, Serona Partners, and in media partnership with C-Tech. Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Today we're talking about female tech. Meet Yotam Hod, the CEO and co-founder of Gynica, a medical company at the forefront of therapeutic cannabis research and development in the field of women's health. Previously, Yotam was the CEO and co-founder of Lumir Lab, a global leading cannabis research and development laboratory aimed to provide evidence-based cannabis solutions. Both companies are subsidiaries of Asana Bio Group, a holding company specializing in scientific advancements in the field of cannabis, which Yotam serves as its CEO. Yotam Hod, welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. I have a feeling this episode is going to have some really, really interesting conversations. How are you today?
I'm very well, Michael. How about yourself today?
I'm doing well, and I'm a little confused, I have to say, Yotam. I have to understand, how does one get to work on cannabis products for women's health? It's an amazing opportunity, and there's probably a lot of innovation to be doing there, and it's a remarkable thing to work on. But it's still a little confusing for me to be speaking to a young male entrepreneur working on this startup.
I completely understand where you're coming from and what's behind these questions. I live it for the past almost 5 years, and I have to follow these questions. And there's some very good basis to it. The fact is that in a way, I'm a black sheep in a doctor's family. Probably not the first, but as such, I always found the intersection of business and medicine very appealing. And since a very young age, growing up with, I would say, medical terminology around me and understanding the needs, the gaps, some of the different aspects that involve, the next generation of medical practice, I found myself very attracted by the business side of medicine. And that led me to my first job after my military service, working for a medical conference organizer, starting off as an assistant producer and climbing up all the way to lead for a certain period the sales department, raising millions of dollars for medical conferences from pharmaceutical companies. But around 2016, beginning of 2016, I found myself reading more and more and actually being pulled by mentally by an emerging field called the medical cannabis space, and realized that here in Israel there's apparently, and I didn't know that before, but apparently Israel is the global leader in cannabis research. Moreover, the most notoriously known active.
We were a leader. I didn't realize there were some initiatives.
Indeed. So what's behind it? The fact is that THC actually was discovered in Israel in the early 60s by Professor Rafael Meshulam.
Really?
Indeed. And there's a funny anecdote about that. I've had already quite a few lectures that I've heard from Professor Meshulam. He's still working, by the way, arriving to the university, the Hebrew University, every day. He's 92 years old, and he is considered to be the founding father of cannabis research. And the story is that cannabis is actually an illegal substance. Moreover, according to the UN 61 Convention, cannabis simply is a dangerous drug. And Israel, and we won't be surprised, but Professor Rafael Meshulam from the Hebrew University heard about this, notoriously known substance called hashish back in the 60s here in Israel. And he heard about different, I would say, appealing effects that are caused by it. And as a chemist, he approached one of his friends at the police station, who ran one of the police stations in the center of Israel. And he asked if he could borrow some of the confiscated hash by the police in order to study what's inside of it. Because, again, purely from a scientific point of view, he was very interested about what's behind it. And funny enough, he found himself coming back from the police station with 5 kilograms of hash to the university. And this is how THC was discovered globally, not here in Israel. This is considered to be the discovery of the first active ingredient in cannabis called THC, tetrahydrocannabinol, which is the notoriously known substance which is psychoactive. Moreover, actually psychotropic. There's a slight difference between psychoactive and psychotropic. We won't get into it, but this was actually a groundbreaking discovery because, as I mentioned, it's illegal, but only in Israel, I guess, you can call your friend in the police station and ask for such a favor. And no one else globally had any access to such substances. And this was actually a door opener that allowed for 50 years of research in academy here in Israel, which is unheard of because cannabis is yet well known by the UN as an illegal substance. So there are quite, I would say, difficult and challenging regulatory hurdles that still are a challenge for the medical cannabis space and the cannabis industry as a whole. But this early 60s discovery actually opened the door for us in Israel to become a global leader and to gain experience of 50 years of real research comparing to other countries where it was simply illegal. Followed by the discovery here back in 1992 of the endocannabinoid system, which was the second major discovery here in Israel. It was discovered by Professor Lumir who actually sits on our advisory board, and he served as the right hand of Professor Meshulam for many years in the Hebrew University, and they are considered to be the forefront of cannabis research globally. And this is just a tiny brief about why Israel is considered a global leader in cannabis research. And it's not just a cliche. It really is the case, because the fact that dozens of researchers have worked throughout their years in academy in such departments. Actually, throughout the years, it was only the Hebrew University. Later on, the Technion joined and other universities as well. But this fact, comparing to any other country for many years that it was simply illegal, brought Israeli researchers to really lead the way in everything to do with cannabis science.
Unbelievable. So I can obviously, through your deep understanding and excitement to this field, I can understand the cannabis side of the venture, but I'm still a little puzzled by the gynecological side of the venture.
Absolutely. So there's definitely a strong basis to it as well. But I'll start off with where I began. And the fact is that I started my journey in the cannabis space after taking a course at the Technion in 2016. It was actually the second entrepreneurship in cannabis course It was a first of its kind, I would say, academic course that allowed to get a taste of pretty much every vertical and angle of the cannabis space. Just, as an anecdote, today is around the 25th class of this course or so. But this course actually opened my eyes to the realization that, first of all, Israel has such a unique value proposition for the world, for this emerging cannabis industry evolving. But moreover, I realized that the biggest gap that there is currently globally is the fact that we simply don't know enough about cannabis. And moreover, in order to know enough, we need to research it. But because of the regulatory hurdles that quite limit the ability to research, it's very narrow. And especially 6 years ago, it didn't change much until today. But this realization that research and development is key for acceptance of both regulators, the medical community, the scientific community, the patients, most of all. The only way to bring comfort, credibility, safety is by bringing research and development and proper, I would say, scientific manners to such an emerging field. And with this in mind, I truly fell in love with the space and with this field. But it was a nice thing to say that this is what I want to do with the rest of my life. But I needed to find something that's more solid. And funny enough, back then, because there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation with everything to do with cannabis, I found myself, although I'm not a scientist, I have a BA in business administration. I always had a business orientation, but I found myself reading scientific papers about cannabis because this was the only, I would say, credible source for knowledge about cannabis. And one day, a certain paper caught my eye after reading that the female reproductive system is actually the organ with most endocannabinoids in our body after the brain. The female reproductive system is the organ with most endocannabinoids in our bodies after the brain. That means that when we speak about endocannabinoids, those are receptors that actually bind to the active ingredients in cannabis called cannabinoids. And actually, when we consume, we look at it as a key and a hole to the key, meaning once we already have those receptors, but once we use cannabis, we're able to trigger them and activate those receptors. And those receptors are the one responsible for the therapeutic effect that's spoken about with cannabis. And surprisingly, we realized that the female reproductive system is the organ with most of those endocannabinoids after our brain. And this added up to the fact that, as I mentioned earlier, come from a doctor's family as a black sheep in a way, and my father is a gynecologist, and things that are quite, I would say, taboo in our world were not a taboo for us, on Shabbat dinner or just on a daily basis. Speaking about menstruation, about sex, about bleeding, about pregnancy. About such issues was not, I would say, was not something that was hidden under the rug for us. And I think that this is one of the things that allowed me to realize that the field of women's health is quite unaddressed. And in the past few years, I've learned it more and more, actually. And I unfortunately, I realize how much, I'm sorry to say, that they have been neglected by the medical community, by the scientific community, by the industry, with the most basic issues and ailments that women are suffering from, that still are unmet needs, real unmet needs. I mean, when we speak about painful menstruation, we speak about 800 million women worldwide every day who are going through their periods. And generally speaking, some of them have to, be in bed for a day or two every month. or when we speak about dyspareunia, which is painful intercourse. Around 40% of women suffer from painful intercourse throughout their life cycle. And
Wow.
both issues that I've mentioned, both dysmenorrhea, which is menstrual pain, and dyspareunia, painful intercourse, affect hundreds of millions of women and are both real unmet needs. There are no dedicated treatments that the, I would say, Western industry has provided them. So even when you speak about menstrual pain, currently what women are using is Tylenol, is other pain relievers, but there's nothing targeted, dedicated, locally, and this is very sad. Let's be honest. There's Viagra in the market, but there's no solution for the ailment and the pain of hundreds of millions of women who suffer daily from different issues. And in the past, I would say year or two, we see the great, I would say, rise in interest in what's called femtech, female technologies. This field is booming. We started 5 years ago, but just in the past year or two, you suddenly see the significant raises, the unicorns that are setting up shop as well, and suddenly the industry realizes that leave aside the comfort that those women deserve, that there is a huge opportunity here as well.
Yotam, I have to address this because this is why I do this show, getting exposed to something that I know very little about, and I think that I enjoy researching and I enjoy getting to know companies, and it troubles me that I know so little about female tech, and I personally am inspired by the work that you're doing and your openness about it, and the intentionality with which you come and you understand, saying this may be taboo for the world, but this is a part of our regular conversations. It's an important thing to be able to talk about, especially it's something we must talk about given the how underserved this market is, and so I'm personally inspired by the fact that you're dedicating your career right now to be addressing this, and I'm excited by the idea that there is now a rise and boom in this, and I think that what I'm curious about is, from your perspective, how is the reception from those around you, from the people around you, in the business world? Are people aligning to this understanding that there is a huge market for this that is underserved, while it's also going to be making a really positive impact?
I can tell you that it's changing, but we still have a long way to go. And I have to tackle 2 points here because I'm dealing in two, I would say, notorious subjects. One is cannabis, and the other one is
Mm-hmm.
women's health. Both subjects, we see a lot of synergy between those two because both subjects have been neglected by the public, by the industry, by the regulators for many years. They are both in their quite early stages, and they are both quite taboos each in their respective field. Cannabis because everything we know about it, and women's health because it's not so, I would say, freely discussed. As I mentioned, sex, menstruation, bleeding. Well, until 2 or 3 years ago, we would see commercials for menstrual products that mimic blood with a blue color. I mean, it's ridiculous. And the fact is that it's starting to change. We are beginning to see the subject out there on the table, discussed, and there's no other way. I think that post Me Too era did its thing as well, and I think that just as we see the women empowerment movement in different arenas, so when we speak about their health, this should be as a top priority. But you
So
were
if you're
asking
looking today
about.
at
Sorry.
entrepreneurs around the world that are considering where what type of venture they want to be doing and where they're going to be addressing, what are some tips that you can provide them so that they can either not be not be taken aback by the tabooness of the subject, or even simply just expose themselves to the subject, because obviously there's less materials about this and there's less hype around this right now, and therefore, with the butterfly effect, then there's less, as a cause, there's less people that are going to start companies in this field.
It's true, but we definitely see the change. I can tell you that just 2 years ago, 2019, there were around 200 femtech companies globally. I think that now this number is around the amount of companies in Israel dealing with femtech. But I would say, in addition to that, it took me a very long time to be able to convince and be able to present again as a young male who's not a doctor, and honestly this is the case, about how am I the one speaking about women's health and trying to provide solutions to a problem of hundreds of millions of women worldwide. But the point is that I think that because I'd say took off the table the taboos and are able to speak about it freely without a slight laugh or a wink, allows us to do it the right way, truly. And we have here discussions, I can tell you, that both with our team, both with potential our partners and people who we are discussing with, many times it's the first time that some of our, let's say, the ones on the other side of the table are speaking about such subjects in an open manner and without any emotions behind it on one hand, and without any excitement or I would say shyness around it. And this is the way to do it. I think that in the end we need to neglect and avoid all the different I would say stigmas and emotional aspects of speaking about sexual matters and menstruation and such. And once we're able to do that and speak in a direct professional manner, then this is the only way, I think, to really bring it to the front and to uh, avoid the past stigmas and taboos surrounding such subjects.
Yotam, thank you very, very much for this fascinating conversation. I learned so much, and I have my work cut out for me for after this to do my own research. And but for now, thank you very much for everything. I really appreciate your time, your energy, and the amazing work that you're doing here. That is going to make a very, very positive impact, not just for females, but for knowledge and understanding around the world. So, Yotam, thank you, and stay safe and stay healthy.